Welcome to Within the Frame, where we bring the most pressing issues across the globe into focus. I'm Kim Mok-yeon. Over the past 5 days, NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang has been in Korea, meeting with leaders from SK, Hyundai Motor Group, LG, and NAVER as well. But this was more than just a series of meetings. It led to concrete partnerships across AI semiconductors, cloud, and even infrastructure. From SK hynix's expanding role in advanced memory to new collaborations in AI factories and supercomputing, the scope is clearly widening. AI is no longer just about chips, it's moving into data centers, telecom networks, and even national infrastructure. So the question now is, as this global AI race accelerates, who is going to lead and where does Korea stand in that competition? For answers to this, we connect to Hwagyun Kim, professor of banking and finance at Texas A&M University's Mays Business School. A very big welcome, Professor.
Pleasure to be here.
And also joining us from Taipei is Sung-Soo Eric Kim, founder and CEO of Data Crunch Global and adjunct professor at Yonsei Graduate School of Business. Good to see you.
Thank you for having me tonight.
So let's start right away first with Professor Hwagyun. So like I've said, Jensen Huang has met with the leaders of Korea's large major conglomerates, including SK, Hyundai Motor Group, and LG, and others during his visit to Korea. And they announced multiple partnerships, I believe. So taken all together, do you think this kind of shows that NVIDIA now sees Korea as a key partner in the global AI ecosystem?
Yes, I think Korea has been a very reliable and important partner and also a big the market for NVIDIA anyhow. But then, like you mentioned, now the NVIDIA and also a lot of other AI-related companies start perceive Korea as one of the pivotal player and also the partner in case of the global AI ecosystem. So traditionally, I think global investors viewed Korean technology basically through some highly cyclical lens in some sense, in that if the memory price increases or the memory market experiences a surge, then this whole stock market and also overall performance actually jumped up. And then if it's not, then I think it's actually precipitously just dropping very fast. But nowadays, I think if we start looking at both stock market and also all other situations, I think we can clearly see some structural departure from this established view in that sense. I think Mr. Huang's extensive meetings, I think, also demonstrate that part, and it encompasses wide range of key stakeholders. If it was just mostly Samsung and the Hyundai before, now hynix, then I think now Hyundai Motors, actually the LG, NAVER, and then all other also the gaming companies. So I think overall system of this AI players actually becoming an important the stakeholders actually for NVIDIA as well. So I think in that sense, I believe the Jensen Huang, I think, wants to build some strong alliance. I think some sort of like a team NVIDIA, I think, together with a lot of the Korean manufacturers and software companies. Virtually, I think, in some sense, Korea has a very unique position, as he also mentioned, I think, somewhere, in that I think Korea has a very strong manufacturing grounds, but at the same time, the human capital, the structure actually for the knowledge base, the economics actually is also very strong. So I think in that sense, let alone, of course, the HBM and other semiconductor businesses. So I think it's a very unique, I think, and also therefore it's going to be great, the partner to the NVIDIA.
Right, so it really seemed to highlight how much emphasis they're putting on Korea and Korean companies as well. Now, when we build on this, Professor Sung-Soo, Jensen Huang described SK hynix as NVIDIA's largest memory partner with billions of dollars in annual purchases expected to grow. So at this point, does this reflect a deeply integrated AI supply chain?
So what is AI? AI is a model that we learn from data, and it mimics the human logic to produce results in a generative way. So it requires a lot of memory, just like human brain. That's why the high bandwidth memory HBM chips of SK, which are the finest in the world, is most valuable in this world right now. So NVIDIA, of course, in order to grow their business, they have to partner up with SK hynix in order to drive this AI era as a leader. So as a plan, their Vera Rubin supercomputer platform is expected to use about 60% to 70% of HBM4 chips. And also last week at Taipei, President Choi of SK announced that they will double the capacity of HBM4 in order to meet the growing demand of HBM4 chips just in 5 years. That's a very ambitious roadmap to deeply partner with NVIDIA to lead this AI era as a computing-based leadership. So I think that's a very significant partnership between SK hynix and NVIDIA.
Right. As our Professor Sung-soo has just touched upon, Jensen Huang, he also emphasized HBM as a key component of next generation AI infrastructure, highlighting rising demand, of course. So, Professor Hwagyun, how much could this actually strengthen Korea's position in the global semiconductor market?
So this episode, I think the Professor Sung-soo Kim explained pretty well, but to expand the capacity and also the usability of this Gen AI and also in general, the robotics and everything, you need knowledge and you need memory therefore. And this period, I think, reminded me of this early period of the IT boom. And also the computing boom, I think. In that era, I think the DRAM, I think, was the main player. Now I think you need even more, I think, the memory. So this high bandwidth actually is very important because of the way that this AI kind of searches for the answers and then give the probability weights to each case of the scenarios actually when they just try to answer certain questions. So I think in that sense, it's going to be very similar to the big jump of the Samsung and the Hynix actually in the early 2000s when it jumped. Except I think this is going to be much, much bigger. I think at least 10 times or 20 times bigger because of the way that this one works. In the past, it was mainly about the bandwidth to make the internet available, and then also some of the graphics such as the video and the cards, actually the photography actually to transfer. Now I think you have to just solve very complex problems, I think, with lots of the data. So in that sense, I think it's going to be strengthened even way more, I think, compared to that period. So I think definitely it's going to be very impactful.
Right, so we will be looking forward to that sector. And beyond memory, of course, we hear that partnerships have extended to SK Telecom, NAVER, covering AI cloud, supercomputing, and AI factories as well. Professor Sung-soo, how does this full stack expansion change the traditional semiconductor value chain?
So previously, semiconductor companies were merely just supplying computing power to all these IT companies. Let's say Amazon has AWS. They have server business, and Dell and other companies manufacture computers. And semiconductor companies would just provide the computing resources as a device company to these companies. Now, because of AI, computing power is the most important thing in the world. So now computing, these companies like NVIDIA or other companies are able to integrate the market as a strategy. That's the core strategy of NVIDIA. Last year in Computex, Jensen Huang announced that that NVIDIA will build an AI factory in Taiwan. And what is the concept of the AI factory? It is integrating data centers and computing power and even AI models in one gigantic AI factory, which is similar to a hyperscaler data center, if you would imagine. And why NVIDIA is trying to partner up with SK hynix and NAVER. or SK Telecom, because SK Telecom also is heavily investing in data center business, and NAVER is our leader in AI development. So with NVIDIA, together with SK Telecom and NAVER, they can initiate a AI factory concept in Korea or even maybe globally. So this partnership is really important, and it's very a symbolic change in the history of technology, because now computing companies are now leading AI, integrating AI, because again, computing power is so important. So that's a very new trend, and it signals how the future is going to change.
Right. Now, going back to what you've just mentioned, Professor Sung-soo, so AI factories are being described as more than just data centers. It's now systems that generate value through continuous processing. Then how could this actually reshape how companies use AI and drive productivity as well?
So for example, if let's say that you want to develop AI by yourself in a company, that's becoming more and more important because of security reasons, or because of data breach, concerns, or any kind of reasons. You would like to have an isolated AI, which is your own AI, right? Then how are you going to acquire the computing resources? Are you going to buy expensive servers? That probably is not an option for a lot of companies. Maybe large companies can do it. But what about small and medium company? AI is for everyone right now, every company. We need a infrastructure that can provide the AI resources in a standardized way, which means that we have to have a metric of how much computing power you're using to drive this AI. Just like electricity, how do we use electricity? Because we have a metric system based on watts, unless we will have to calculate all the raw materials that are necessary for power generation. Because we have created infrastructure, we are able to use electricity with a standardized metric. That is a concept of AI factory. There is something called token that probably a lot of you are aware about. If you are using AI, you get allocated a certain amount of tokens, and if you use all those tokens, then you have to pay more. So token is a standard metric for using AI, and that's how we are able to estimate how much computing power we're going to use and how much we're going to pay. This creates a huge ecosystem of how we have been working before. For example, right now we need about 30 to 40 million professional developers around the world to create about 3 trillion in annual salaries. But with AI, we can triple, right? Or make this market 3 times. So with significant outputs. So it's fundamentally changing the society. And I'm very glad that our Korean companies are a core partner of NVIDIA, driving this lead globally together.
So technically, staying with this AI factories, Korea, of course, is moving to launch and expand AI factories across Asia. So Professor Hwagyun, from a financial perspective, could you tell us what kind of investment flows or capital shifts could follow after this?
Well, I think this is basically requiring a gigantic amount of capital expenditure, right? So to finance this, you need multiple sources of funds and money. Some of them come from government, but it's not going to be enough. So I think that obviously the private capital should enter. And that's actually where the financial side actually is going to be very important in its actually the establishment. So we will likely to see, if this indeed happens, then we will likely to see global private equity, sovereign wealth funds, not just in a Korean government, and also the very specialized real estate investment funds and trusts actually will enter because you need to build something. I mean, this looks very virtual, but I think you really need like actual real estate, right? So for instance, you need to have a data center, you need to have like a research facility and all these kind of things. So overall, if this indeed works, then, you know, some form of like this Silicon Valley, like, you know, the huge real estate actually is going to emerge. So I think in some sense, I mean, I know that the Jensen Huang actually was mentioning the semiconductors, but I think not just that, but I think, you know, lots of the other research facilities actually will just pop up. So clearly that will trigger a lot of the structural re-rating of the Korean markets and drawing in, I would say, much stickier and the longer term institutional capital that actually will enter the market. And I think that's going to be a huge, the plus actually for the capital inflows actually for the Korean market.
Right, Professor Hwagyun. But we also hear that governments are also stepping in to secure GPU supply and support infrastructure. So could AI now be seen as a new infrastructure-driven investment theme?
Definitely. It's basically like, if you remember this IT, the information highway start with this, you're building huge internet lines and fiber optic. So basically the same. So the government actually has its clear role, I think, in terms of creating this, the baseline structure, and then that's going to be almost like a public goods nature. And I think, as mentioned earlier by Professor Kim, I think, you know, some of the smaller and the more individualized, actually, the firms definitely need more help from the government in that side, I think, in that regard. So I think for that, I think the new infrastructure-driven investment should be made in addition to the huge private investment. This is like kind of the all team effort, not just the public sector or the private sector investment.
Right, so definitely a very important shift in how markets will view AI. Now, when we look ahead, Jensen Huang said AI infrastructure is still in its early stages with growth expected for more than a decade. Professor Sung-soo, in that race, who do you think is most likely to take the lead, companies or countries, whoever?
So if you look at the history of industry development, the innovation comes from companies. Of course, in the past, if you look at Korean development model, government had to allocate a large capital and assign companies to actually build that technology and industry. But now, because private sector can drive that capital, such as NVIDIA, look how much money SK hynix has. Look how much money NVIDIA has. Those companies are driving innovation. So they are actually shaping the AI infrastructure right now. But of course, this is also tied to a question of how we want to form the society in the future in the AI era. We also have, concerns that what is the role of the government in this AI infrastructure? And of course, we would like to have AI be accessible to everyone as a common, resource, as a public good. So the government should take that role. Government also should invest in the future, take initiative in AI infrastructure, maybe together with these private companies to ensure the social welfare of AI resources, to make sure that everyone has access to AI computing power. Because who has access to AI computing power becomes power. And that's the role of government when we shape the future in the next decade. Think about what is the collaboration model with these large companies and governments to make AI accessible to everyone.
Right, a very important point that you've mentioned. Close coordination between companies and governments would be necessary so that everyone would be able to enjoy the development of AI. Now, before we conclude our discussion tonight, so this visit of Jensen Huang, it makes it clear that AI is becoming a competition over national infrastructure. Professor Hwagyun, do you see Korea emerging as a core player or remaining dependent on global tech leaders?
Well, it's a bit early at this stage, but I think the Korea I think has its fair chance this time, and I think if this both the coordination and also the innovation actually work well, then I think it's going to be a very bright future for Korea, in that it has both the software power and the hardware power actually necessary for this the AI industry. And at the end of the day, what matters is human capital. Again, I think this time the human capital definition is a little blurry because now AI is also very intelligent. But I think the interaction is going to be extremely important. And remember, I think South Korea at least has like the highest IQ and then very highest level of education, meaning the input, the data actually that we can actually give to the AI is probably one of the highest levels. So I think some of this, the local AI system or the infrastructure or the factory that the Korea will build probably will be one of the smartest. In that sense, I think it is going to be very promising in that regard.
Right. So in the end, it's not just about technology, but we'll really have to keep close tabs on where Korea will stand in this global race moving forward. Thank you so much for your insights, Professor Hwagyun.
Thank you.
And of course, Professor Sung-so, we really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
And that'll be all from us on Within the Frame tonight. Be sure to tune in again next time as we continue to explore the stories that matter. Till then, stay informed and engaged.